All right. Ever thought about being a taxi controller? It's a busy job, that's for sure. You're juggling calls from passengers, drivers, all that. Today, we're going to dive deep into how to nail that interview.
Yeah, and we're using actual questions that we took right from RoleCatcher's database.
We've also got RoleCatcher's career guide right here. Going to pull some insights from that so you can show off your skills, the stuff interviewers want to see.
We'll even throw in some tips on how RoleCatcher's AI can help you out, like tailoring your answers to what the job needs. Think of this like interview boot camp just for you.
Boot camp. Love it.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump right in. Question 1 from the RoleCatcher Interview Guide. Can you tell us about your previous experience working as a taxi controller?
All right, hit me with your answer.
Okay, so I might say something like, in my last job, it was at a call center. It was really busy, tons of calls. I had to handle like a lot of them all at once. I had to figure out which ones were urgent, and make sure I was giving out the right information.
Okay, not bad, not bad, but think about this, right? They want to know how your experience fits this job, taxi controller. You see what I mean? Look at the taxi controller career guide. They need someone who can dispatch vehicles, talk to drivers, and make sure customers are happy.
Yeah, so how do I connect those dots?
Okay, so instead of just talking about calls in general, talk about how you handled a ton of requests at once, just like managing a whole bunch of taxis, right? And talk about how you made sure you were clear and accurate when you were giving information. That's important when you're talking to drivers.
Okay, I see. So I could say something like, at the call center, I was handling over 50 calls every hour. I had to prioritize the urgent ones and make sure all the information I gave to different teams was accurate. Kind of like what a taxi controller would do with drivers and passengers.
There you go. Now you're talking. That shows you can handle the pressure.
Now, here's a follow-up question you might get. Can you give me a specific example of a time you had to handle a challenging situation in that role? Uh-oh. Well, there was this one time. Actually, maybe you can give me an example of a good answer.
Sure. Let's say you had a bunch of calls coming in all at once, right? And some people are saying it's an emergency. A good answer might be, well, one time we had this crazy weather and the phones were ringing off the hook. So I quickly went through the calls, figured out which ones were real emergencies, the ones that needed help right away. Then I got my team together and we made sure we answered every call as fast as we could. And we made sure to let people know how long they might have to wait.
That's really helpful. All right, let's move on to question number 2. How do you ensure the safety of passengers and drivers?
This one's all about safety protocols and rules. Don't just say you know the city well, that's not enough. Look, the career guide, it really stresses knowing about public safety and security.
Right. So I could say something like, I'd make sure everyone's safe by staying up to date on traffic, like any accidents or anything. I'd make sure the drivers know what's going on and that they're following the rules, speed limits, and all that.
Okay, good. But how about we make it even better? Be specific. You could say, I'd keep an eye on traffic reports and use the GPS to see if there are any holdups or accidents. I'd let the drivers know right away. And I'd also make sure the drivers know about the company's safety policies, like checking their vehicles and reporting any problems right away.
Yeah, much better. Now, what if they throw this one at me? What would you do if a driver said a passenger was acting strange?
That's where your problem-solving skills come in. They want to see if you can handle the situation and make good decisions. You could say, well, first, I'd get more info from the driver, but I gotta make sure the driver and the other passengers are safe. If it sounds serious, I might tell the driver to pull over somewhere safe, maybe call the police, or send another driver to help out.
Makes sense. Now, before we go to the next question, can you talk a bit about how RoleCatcher's AI can help with these answers?
Of course. RoleCatcher's AI, it looks at job descriptions and suggests what skills and experiences you should talk about in your answers. It can even help you measure your accomplishments, put numbers to them.
Oh, so if they're looking for someone with good communication skills, RoleCatcher might say, hey, tell them how many calls you handled per hour and how well you did.
Right, you got it. It helps you tailor your answers to each job. Makes you stand out,
That's awesome. Okay, let's tackle question 3. How do you handle a difficult customer?
All right, this one is about showing you're professional and you know how to handle conflict. And remember, the career guide says difficult customers, they're part of the job.
True. So I'm guessing offering them a free ride, probably not the best answer, even if they'd like it.
Hmm.
I should focus on listening and staying calm, right?
You got it. You could say something like, first, I'd let the customer know I understand they're frustrated, and I'd really listen to what they have to say. Then I'd explain the situation clearly and try to find a solution. But, I got to stick to the company's rules.
So it's about finding a solution, but also following the rules.
Exactly. Now they might ask, can you give me an example of a time you successfully handled a conflict with a customer?
Hmm. I might need to think about that one. Having a story ready would be good. I might get flustered if they put me on the spot.
I hear ya. Having a few stories in your back pocket, that helps with confidence. Think back to a time you dealt with a tough customer. Any job will do. Doesn't have to be transportation.
Okay. What if I said something like, back when I worked retail, this customer, they were upset because something they bought wasn't working right. So I listened to them, told them I understood why they were frustrated. Then I offered to replace it or give them their money back. Following store policy, but also making sure they felt heard and, like I cared.
Perfect example. It shows you can stay calm, listen, and find a solution that makes the customer happy, all while following the rules. Nice.
Awesome. Okay, next question. How do you manage multiple tasks simultaneously?
Now, this is where you show off those organizational skills, how you prioritize stuff. Super important for a taxi controller, right? You're juggling calls, dispatching drivers, keeping an eye on the systems all at once.
So instead of just saying I'm a good multitasker, I got to give examples, specific ones.
Exactly. Think about times when you were juggling a bunch of things at once at your previous jobs. And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can really help you out.
Really? How?
Okay, so their CV resume builder, it looks at job descriptions and then it suggests skills you should point out based on what they're looking for. So, for instance, if the taxi controller job description says they need someone who can manage high-volume dispatch or do real-time problem solving, RoleCatcher might be like, hey, include these experiences that show you can do that stuff.
That's cool. Takes the guesswork out of it.
For sure. Now back to that multitasking question. You could say, in my last job, I was handling a ton of calls, emails, and customer requests all the time. And a lot of times I had to deal with urgent things while also keeping accurate records and meeting deadlines. But you can make it even better by putting some numbers to it.
So instead of just saying a ton,
Yeah.
I can say how many calls or tasks I handled per hour or per day.
Boom. That's it. And get this, RoleCatcher's AI can even help you figure out those numbers based on your work history. You could say something like, during those super busy times, I handle, let's say, 20 incoming calls and dispatched 15 drivers every hour, all while making sure everything was accurate and running smoothly.
Wow, that does sound a lot better. Much more, specific.
It is, and it really shows you can handle the craziness of being a taxi controller.
Okay, question 5. How do you stay up to date with changes in the transportation industry? This one seems kind of broad.
It is, but it's your chance to show them you take initiative, that you care about learning and growing in your career. Don't just say you read articles online. Think about resources that are specific to the industry.
The career guide, it does mention a few external resources, like the International Municipal Signal Association, IMSA. Can I use those?
Totally. Talking about specific publications, organizations, even conferences, that shows you're really involved in the field. You could say, I stay up to date by reading publications and then name a publication. And I follow organizations like IMSA to learn about best practices and new technology. I also try to go to conferences and webinars whenever I can.
That sounds much more proactive than just saying, I read articles online. Now, what if the interviewer throws a curveball and asks, what are some current trends impacting the taxi industry? I might draw a blank.
Don't sweat it. Do your homework beforehand. The career guide talks about some trends, like how ride-sharing apps are changing things and how GPS and navigation systems are becoming more important and how everyone's talking about sustainability now.
So I could talk about how these trends are changing the taxi business and how I'm learning new skills to keep up.
You got it. You could mention that you're familiar with ride-sharing platforms, you know how to use dispatching software, and you're all about finding fuel-efficient routes to help the environment.
This is super helpful. Before we move on to the other questions, I just wanted to quickly mention RoleCatcher's Career Compass feature. I heard it's awesome for exploring careers.
It really is. It can help you figure out different career paths, what skills you need to move up in the transportation world. It can even show you similar jobs.
So someone who wants to be a taxi controller, they could use Career Compass to see what other options are out there, like transportation planning or logistics, right?
Right. It's all about opening your mind to different possibilities within the field.
Love it. Okay, let's tackle those remaining questions from the RoleCatcher interview guide. Starting with, let's tackle those remaining questions from the RoleCatcher interview guide. Starting with, how do you handle a situation where a driver is running late to pick up a passenger?
Ugh, this one. They want to see you can solve problems, keep the customer happy. It's about thinking fast and making sure those passengers know what's going on.
Right, so no need to panic, right? Just focus on being clear and finding a solution. I might say, okay, if a driver's running behind, first thing, I'd try to get in touch with them, find out why they're late. Then I'd let the passenger know right away, apologize for the wait, and give them a new estimated arrival time.
Good start, good start. But you know what would really impress them? Show them you're proactive. You could add, and if I had to, I'd try to find another driver who's closer to the pickup spot. That way the passenger wouldn't have to wait as long. Oh, and I'd use the GPS to track everything, make sure the passenger's in the loop the whole time.
Yeah, that shows I'm on top of things and looking out for the passenger.
Hmm.
Okay, next question. How do you ensure drivers are following company policies and procedures?
This one's all about showing you understand those policies and that you're not afraid to enforce them. Remember, the career guide makes a big deal about drivers following the rules. It's all about safety and keeping those passengers happy.
So instead of just saying, I'll make sure they follow the rules, I should be more specific,
I
right?
got it. Mention some actual policies, stuff about vehicle maintenance, how they should treat passengers, how they handle payments, all that. You could say, when drivers start, I'd make sure they get trained on all the company policies, and then I'd keep an eye on how they're doing, use GPS tracking and the communication system to check up on them. If there's a problem, I'd deal with it right away, and maybe even give them extra training if they need it.
Much clearer. All right, next one. This one seems tough. Can you tell us about a time when you had to make a difficult decision?
Classic behavioral question. They're trying to see how you make judgments, how you make decisions when things get tough. Key here is to have a story ready. A good one.
Nothing's coming to mind. What kind of story would work for a taxi controller?
Okay, think about a time when you had to make a decision under pressure. Maybe you had to juggle different priorities or you didn't have all the resources you needed. You could talk about a time when you had to prioritize which drivers to send out when there was a sudden rush of calls. Think about things like, how urgent is it for the passenger? Are there enough drivers? Who's closest to the pickup spot? That kind of thing.
I get it. They want to see how I handle problems and make good choices.
Exactly. Okay, next question. How do you ensure that all customer complaints are addressed promptly?
This one seems pretty straightforward. I'd say I'd make sure we keep track of all the complaints and deal with them in a timely manner. And I'd try to see if there are any patterns, things that keep happening so we can improve our service.
Good foundation. But remember, details, details, details. You got to give them the specifics. Talk about how you'd actually do it. Like using a system to track complaints, responding to customers personally, figuring out ways to prevent those problems from happening again.
You're right. I could say we'd use a system to log and track every complaint, make sure the right person gets it. And I'd personally follow up with the customer, make sure their problem was taken care of, and get their feedback so we can keep getting better.
Now you're talking. Okay, last one. How do you ensure the confidentiality of customer information?
Data privacy. Super important these days. I'd say I would follow all the company's rules about protecting data and privacy, and I'd make sure our systems are secure and follow all the regulations.
Good start. But make it even stronger. Tell them about the actual security stuff you do, like passwords, encryption, regular checks to make sure everything's safe.
Right. I could say I'd only access information I need for my job, and I'd use strong passwords and encryption. If I saw any security problems, I'd report it immediately. And I'd make sure all our data practices are up to industry standards and follow the rules.
There you go. You really know your stuff when it comes to data security. And don't forget, RoleCatcher's AI, those tools can give you feedback on your answers, tell you what to improve, and how to tailor your responses to each job.
This deep dive has been amazing. We went through all those key questions from the RoleCatcher interview guide, figured out how to give awesome answers, and even learned how AI can help us with our job search.
Don't forget, confidence and preparation, that's the key. Show them you're passionate about the job, talk about your skills and experience, and be ready to chat about industry trends and what challenges you might face. And hey, use those free resources from RoleCatcher. Their website's got everything you need to ace that interview and get that taxi controller job.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you're feeling ready to rock that taxi controller interview. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and reach for the stars. Okay, so we've tackled a lot of those tricky interview questions, but there are a few more in the RoleCatcher interview guide. Let's keep going. How do you handle a situation where a driver is running late to pick up a passenger?
Okay, yeah. This one is all about showing you can think on your feet and solve problems while keeping that passenger in the loop.
I'd probably start by saying something like, well, first I'd try to contact the driver, see what's causing the delay. Then I'd let the passenger know right away and apologize for the inconvenience. And of course, I'd give them an updated ETA.
That's a good start. But to really make your answer shine, try being even more proactive. Like, if it's necessary, I'd see if there's another driver closer to the pickup spot so the passenger doesn't have to wait as long. And I'd use GPS tracking to keep an eye on the situation and make sure the passenger knows what's happening every step of the way.
Yeah, that definitely shows I'm taking charge, doing everything I can to help the passenger. Okay, how about this one? How do you ensure drivers are following company policies and procedures?
This is where you really showcase your knowledge of those policies and your ability to make sure everyone's following them. The career guide talks about how important it is for drivers to comply with the rules for safety and customer satisfaction.
So more than just saying, I'll make sure they follow the rules, right?
Right. Be specific. Talk about things like vehicle maintenance, how they should interact with passengers, how they handle payments, all those important details. You could say something like, when we onboard new drivers, I'd make sure they're trained on all the company policies, and then I'd regularly check on their performance using GPS tracking and the communication systems. Any issues that come up, I'd address them right away, maybe even provide extra training if needed.
That's a lot more clear and concrete. Okay, this next one seems a little daunting. Can you tell us about a time when you had to make a difficult decision?
Oh, yeah. This is a classic one. It's a behavioral question. They want to see how you handle tough situations, how you make decisions under pressure. Having a specific example ready to go is key here.
To be honest, I'm drawing a blank. What kind of example would be a good fit for a taxi controller role?
Okay, think back to a time when you had to make a decision with limited information. Maybe you had conflicting priorities, or you had to work with limited resources. For example, you could talk about a time when you had to decide which drivers to send out during a sudden surge in demand, weighing things like how urgent the passenger's request is, driver availability, who's closest to the pickup location, all those factors.
They want to see how I approach problems and make good choices even when things are hectic.
Exactly. Now let's move on. How do you ensure that all customer complaints are addressed promptly? What do you think?
For this one, I'd say something like, well, I'd make sure all complaints are documented and that they're dealt with quickly. I'd also look for any recurring issues so we can improve our service.
Good. That's a good foundation. But you know what they say? The devil's in the details. Strengthen your answer by mentioning specific actions, like using a system to track complaints, personally following up with customers, and implementing solutions to avoid those problems in the future.
You're right. I could say we'd use a centralized system to log and track all complaints, make sure they're assigned to the right people. I'd personally follow up with each customer to confirm their concerns were addressed and get their feedback so we can continuously improve our service.
Much better. All right, last question, and it's an important one. How do you ensure the confidentiality of customer information?
Data privacy is a big deal these days. I'd want to assure them that I take it seriously, so I'd probably say something like, I'd strictly follow all company policies regarding data protection and privacy. I'd make sure our systems are secure and meet all the necessary regulations.
That's a solid start. But you know what would really impress them? Talk about specific security measures. Things like strong passwords, encryption, regular security audits, the nuts and bolts.
Good point. Okay, I could say something like, I'd only access the information I need for my job, using strong passwords and encryption protocols. And if I spotted any potential security risks, I'd report them right away.
Oh.
Plus, I'd make sure all our data handling practices are up to industry standards and in line with all regulations.
Awesome. You've shown them you really understand the importance of data security. And hey, don't forget about RoleCatcher's AI-powered tools. They can give you personalized feedback on your answers, help you pinpoint areas for improvement, and tailor your responses to each specific job you apply for.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. We covered so much ground, going through those tough questions from the RoleCatcher interview guide, figuring out how to give really strong answers, and even exploring how AI can give us an edge in our job search.
Absolutely. Remember, confidence and preparation are your best friends when it comes to interviews. Show them your passion for the job, highlight your skills and experience, and be ready to talk about industry trends and the challenges you might face as a taxi controller. And don't forget to check out all the amazing free resources on RoleCatcher's website. They've got everything you need to nail that interview and launch a successful career in the exciting world of transportation.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel empowered and ready to conquer that taxi controller interview. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep reaching for your goals.